The brain learns from the environment. And this is the brain, and your cranial nerves or brain nerves that basically really are all inside your face. And when I look at every single person, I just draw a line down the face and I compare everything from the pupils, the black in the eye, to see if they're symmetrical, these lines on the face, the tongue. I look at like the tone of the tongue. I look at the way the head's tilted. I actually check smell in these kids. And in saying that, what happens is that if this right pupil is really big and there's not a lot of facial tone here and the head's tilted to the right, well, every day, right, this brain, which learns from the environment, is going to be taking in normal information and it's going to be building connections, and then it's going to be underactive inside of here. So what it's doing is that the environment, through our way our brain takes in the senses through these nerves, the cranial nerves, it's actually going to not program and code and build the brain symmetrically. And that starts creating an imbalance. And where these cranial nerves are located is actually where the primitive reflexes reside, right? So like one of the classic, kind of things that you see in these kids is something called a Moro, a startle reflex. These are the kids that, have to put headphones on, they cover their eyes, or if they walk into places, they freak out, or if you come too close to their face, they get scared. And in saying that, those kids, if you look at their pupils, the black in the eye, they're going to be this big. They're going to be really big. And the purpose of that is that when the brain feels threatened, it's going to dilate the pupils so the way the brain can basically see everything in the environment that's a threat. And the problem is that these pupils stay like that all day long. Yeah. And small pupils are a calm brain, big pupils are a scared brain. So then if you say that, as the brain basically tries to communicate to the body, even for like speech, it has to pass through where the eyes are. And that area goes to something called the midbrain. And that area is so crucial because that's actually what's going to control the alertness inside the brain. And the brain does not basically learn stressed, right? Yeah. Calmer you are, the more that you can learn. So in saying that, if I want to get a kid to speak and a kid has, big dilated pupils and he's scared of everything, well, as the brain sends a signal to the face, it gets blocked right here. So when you do these primitive reflexes, what they basically do is they basically improve blood flow to this area of what's called the brainstem that shoots up into the brain and it matures it. But the thing is that what if there is infection underneath, such as maybe the sinuses, and the way that this nerve that runs through the sinus, it runs through the whole brainstem. So every area where all the primitive reflexes are. So if I have this underlying infection or inflammation and it's going to be hitting these areas of the brain and it's not allowing, when I'm a parent taking my kid to speech therapy or to PT or to OT or to chiropractors or whoever they bring them to, is that if the immune system is hitting these areas, well, then what happens is they're also going to be, not getting the full results or the full outcomes or even regression because there's something still stressing the brain out. So cranial nerves are very, very important with being able to take in proper information to balance out basically the brain waves and the connections inside the brain.
So when you do have one of those scared children that comes into the clinic and they are those children that run, that really don't want to be in a room and they're like scared little creatures, how do you go about calming them so that you can treat them?
Yeah, so the first thing is that, I've scanned thousands of these little kids' brains. So, from knowing what their brain looks like is that the brain in those kids has something called high beta. High beta is when you're in fight or flight, and they have a lot of beta, which is like alertness. So they're like hyper alert. So what I want to do is I want to down regulate the brain. So when you look at the brain from a wave perspective, you have delta when you go to sleep. Theta is like a kind of when you wake up, you kind of like a little drowsy, kind of relaxed state. Then you have alpha, which is where the brain's a relaxed but a learning state. Then you have beta, which is what we're in right now, like being alert. High beta, super stressed out, lying in the room. And then you have gamma waves. So what I basically do is I use acoustic stimulation. I use theta brainwaves. I use acoustic music. So I have like, a room I try to get these kids in and I start playing like theta music. And the goal is this, is that muscles move to rhythm. So I'm also going to basically start literally hitting the brain with theta waves. And what happens is that it can start trying to entrain the brain to start downregulating itself. So that's one thing. The one big thing that most of these kids have when that happens is their pupils are so massive. So what I try to do is I'm like chasing a kid around with, I use an app. It's called Metro Timer. And what it does is it produces basically a rhythmic movement, and it also produces a flashy light, right? Light and sound. And light and sound, they hit this little bitty tract. You know, in neurology, we have these things called tracts, which is like wires that go to the brain. But when you use light and sound, what it does is it hits this thing called the midbrain, which is where the eyes are, and it directly fires to the brain. So what I normally do in all these kids, I have acoustic music, theta music playing. I put sound near the left ear, which is going to primarily go to the right hemisphere. And then I hit the outside of the left eye, the pupil. And really interesting that it actually makes the right pupil, the larger pupil, also get smaller, and it fires and it starts sending dopamine and stimulation to the right hemisphere. And if I can get this area of the brain to turn on, it's going to basically calm these kids down. So it's a great way. You know, I had a kid today, so this is Tuesday here for me in Dubai. Literally we did 8 hours. We did literally 8 hours. So 4 hours yesterday, 4 hours to date of just literally theta music, literally acoustic, like a metronome timer in the left ear, shining a light in the corner of the left eye. And then we got this kid literally after literally 2 days of doing this, he literally goes to his mom. He literally hugs mom, kisses mom, and says, "Mama." And the mom's like, "Oh my gosh." Like he said, "Mama." And I'm like, yes, but this is what happened, right? Is that, yes, your kid hears everything. He knows what words are, but the brain is just too stressed out to basically and scared to be able to express, anything.